birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Thomas. Happy birthday to you.
Who was Thomas Paine? Why did progressive Americans honor him? And why did others try to make us forget who he was? Let me tell you. Contributing fundamentally to the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the struggles of British workers in the Industrial Revolution, Thomas Paine was one of the most remarkable political writers of the modern world, the greatest radical of a radical age. And yet, this son of an English artisan did not become a radical until his arrival in America in late 1774 at the age of 37. And he had no expectations that revolution would ensue. However, struck by America's startling contradictions, magnificent possibilities, and wonderful energies, and moved by the spirit and determination of the American people to resist British authority, he dedicated himself to the American cause. In fact, he defined the American cause. By way of his pamphlets, Common Sense and the American Crisis Papers, and through words such as, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again, and these are the times that try men's souls," Paine not only emboldened Americans to turn their colonial rebellion, notice rebellion, it was just a rebellion up in Massachusetts. Paine persuaded them, he convinced them, he motivated them, he encouraged them, he emboldened them to turn a rebellion into a revolution. He also defined the new nation in a democratically expansive and progressive fashion. He called for the separation of church and state before anyone else. And he articulated an American identity charged with exceptional purpose and promise. 5 feet 10 inches tall, with a full head of dark hair and striking blue eyes, Paine was inquisitive, gregarious, and compassionate, yet strong-willed, combative, and ever ready to argue about and fight for the good and the right, which is also why I love Mike Burns, okay? A working man before an intellectual, Paine developed his revolutionary ideas not from scholarly study, though he read voraciously. Rather, he developed it all the more from experience. Experience that convinced him that the so-called lower orders, not just the highborn and the propertied, had the capacity both to comprehend the world and to govern it. Addressing his arguments, not merely to the governing classes, but all the more to those who had been excluded from political debate and deliberation, Paine helped to transform the very idea of politics and who made up the political nation. It was Paine's common sense and the popular response to it that led to the Declaration on July 4, 1776. At the end of the Revolutionary War, Paine was a popular hero, known as Common Sense. Diplomat, poet, and Continental Army chaplain Joel Barlow wrote, as it says right up there on that wall, "Without the pen of Paine, the sword of Washington would have been wielded in vain." And yet Paine was still not finished. To him, Americans possessed extraordinary political, economic, and cultural potential. He wrote, "The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. 'Tis not the affair of a city, a county, a province, or a kingdom, but of a continent, of at least 1/8 part of the whole globe. 'Tis not the concern of a day, a year, or an age. Posterity are virtually involved in the contest, and will be more or less affected even to the end of time by the proceedings now." America's struggle had turned Paine into an inveterate champion of liberty, equality, and democracy. And after the Revolution, he went on to apply his pen to fresh struggles. In Rights of Man, he defended the French Revolution of 1789 against conservative attack. He challenged Britain's political aristocratic and monarchical political order. And he outlined a series of public initiatives, including, and if you don't know it already, Paine was the first person to think of and outline a social security system. If you go to the website of of the U.S. Social Security Authority, you will see Paine is the godfather of Social Security. All of this to address the inequalities that made life oppressive for working people and the poor, especially for the aged. In the Age of Reason, he criticized organized religion and the power of churches and clerics. And in Agrarian Justice, he proposed a democratic system of addressing poverty. This is really important to the kids' table back there. Jillian, Laura, who did I meet tonight? Tom? No. Well, yes. He's got the incredible handshake, that guy. In Agrarian Justice, Paine proposed a democratic system of addressing poverty that would entail taxing the landed rich to provide grants to young people and pensions to the elderly. Reared an Englishman, adopted by America, and honored as a Frenchman, Paine often called himself a citizen of the world. But the United States always remained paramount in his thoughts and evident in his labors, and in his later writings, he continued to shape the young nation's development. And yet, as great as his contributions were, they were not always appreciated, and his affections were not always reciprocated. Paine's democratic arguments, his style, his appeal, as well as his social background, a working man, his single-mindedness antagonized many among the powerful, the property, the prestigious, the pious, and made him enemies even within the ranks of his fellow patriots. I was going to read a quote from John Adams. My wife doesn't like it. You'll have to read the book, okay? Elites and wannabe elites feared the power of Paine's pen and the radical implications of his arguments. In reaction, they and their heirs sought to disparage his character, suppress his memory, and limit the influence of his ideas. And according to most accounts, they succeeded. For much of the 19th century, well into the 20th, Paine's pivotal role in the making of the United States was effectively erased in the official telling. Writing in the 1880s, Theodore Roosevelt believed he could characterize Paine with impunity as a filthy little atheist, though Paine was neither filthy, little, nor an atheist. In fact, among the elites, Paine's name persistently conjured up the worst images, leading generations of historians and biographers to assume that memory of Paine's contributions to American history had been lost. But they were wrong. Paine had died, but neither his memory nor his legacy ever expired. His contributions were too fundamental. His vision of America's meaning and possibilities too firmly imbued in the dynamic of political life, in our hearts and minds, to be so easily shed or suppressed. At times of crisis, when the Republic itself seemed in jeopardy, Americans almost instinctively turned to Paine and his words. Even those who apparently disdained him and what he represented could not fail to draw on elements of his vision. Moreover, there were those who would not allow Paine and his arguments to be forgotten. Contrary to the ambitions of the ruling elites, as well as the presumptions of historians and biographers, Paine remained a powerful presence in American politics and public life. Recognizing the persistent and developing contradictions between the nation's ideals and the nation's reality, diverse Americans, native-born and immigrant, black, brown, and white, struggled to defend, extend, and deepen freedom, equality, and democracy. Rebels, reformers, and critics such as Fanny Wright in the 1830s, William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the suffragist, Susan B. Anthony, the suffragist, Walt Whitman, America's greatest poet, Herman Melville, one of its greatest novelists, How many people have made it all the way through Moby Dick? I bow to you. Abraham Lincoln, one of America's 3 greatest presidents. Mark Twain, Emma Goldman, the great anarchist. Eugene Debs, the great labor leader. Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Martin Luther King Jr., our great civil rights leader. And innumerable others, right down to the present generation, rediscovered Paine's career and work and drew ideas, inspiration, and encouragement from them. Working men's advocates, abolitionists, freethinkers, suffragists, anarchists, populists, socialists, progressives, labor and community organizers, peace activists, and liberals have garnered political and intellectual energy from Paine, renewed his presence in American life, and served as the prophetic, I love this term, the prophetic memory of his radical vision of America. Veterans, too, from the time of the Revolution to the present day, have carried the democratic promise of Thomas Paine with them and called on their fellow citizens to live up to its spirit. When I was writing my new book, I came across a story, an incredible story, which I referred to in my new book, and I even imagined writing a very short book about it. If I had the skills of a novelist or a playwright, I would do it. Anyhow, in 1932, in the middle of the Great Depression, 20,000 out of work, many often homeless, World War I veterans from all around the country, white and black, quite a few accompanied by wives and children, made their way to Washington, D.C. in hopes of securing early payment of the Veterans Bonus that Congress had approved in 1924 for disbursement in 1945. These bonus marchers, as they came to be called, were a lobbying force of the people, trying to pressure President Herbert Hoover and Congress to act. And determined not to go away hungry and homeless, they set up peaceful encampments around the city to make their case. However, on July 28, 1932, one of the most dangerous men in America, General Douglas MacArthur, ordered fully armed cavalry and infantry troops to storm the bonus marchers' encampments and drive the veterans and their families out of the Capitol, killing several, bloodying hundreds. Nobody, in the face of the Depression and in the wake of such violence, nobody imagined democracy might survive. Communists fantasized revolution. The rich, some of whom spoke openly, if not longingly, called for a strongman, a Benito Mussolini, to take charge. Warning of the peril facing American civilization, Vanity Fair magazine called for appointing a dictator. Even the editor of the American Political Science Review wondered aloud if perhaps we shall have a dictator. Perhaps we shall go fascist. Who can guarantee we may not even someday go communist? Though how you go fascist and communist at the same time, I don't know, I'm not sure. Nevertheless, there were those who had more faith and confidence in America and its people. Liberals and progressives called for democratic public action and reminded their fellow citizens of what they were capable of. No one more so than presidential candidate Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who would project nothing less than a New Deal. And yet, I think the finest testimony, absolutely the finest testimony to a continuing belief in our nation's historic purpose came from a contingent of those bonus marchers. The bonus marchers driven from Washington, D.C., who made their way to New York City. How many of you have been to New York? There in New York City, along the city's Hudson River shoreline, those veterans, those bonus marchers, built in 1932, they built a multiracial and cooperative Hooverville on the shoreline. And they flew the stars and stripes over nearly every hut. And guess what they called their community? Camp Thomas Paine. Paine and his vision of a free, equal, and democratic America were never forgotten. Ordinary Americans, veterans in the lead, made sure of that. So in our times that try men's souls, men's and women's souls, when inequalities of power and wealth once again threaten America's promise, when our own freedoms are denied by political and economic elites, when the NSA is bugging my microphone, when the meaning of America itself seems to be in question, let us keep faith with those veterans. Let us celebrate the man who in 1776 grabbed hold of America's finest hopes and aspirations, and not only called for an independent United States, but articulated America's world historic purpose and promise to liberate men and women from tyranny and pursue freedom, equality, and democracy. So let us raise our glasses. Listen first. Long live the memory and legacy of the American patriot and citizen of the world, Thomas Paine. Indeed, let us toast Thomas Paine with his finest words. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. Thank you. Thank you very much.